Hi, this is Muscle Phil back again for another show. And this one is it's come together kind of spontaneously, but I wanted to do it for a long time. And so what I'm going to do first is take a quotation from a book that my father told me I should read 55 years ago, which was the last time I saw him. It's called The Education of Henry Adams, and I'm going to read it, but I'm going to change a pronoun because I want to reflect some of these ED values, which are so much a part of UW-Eau Claire and what I've bought into. And originally it's Henry Adams said, "A teacher affects eternity. He can never stop where his influence stops. He can never tell where his influence stops." And of course, what's wrong with that is the teachers that I'm going to do a tribute to, 2 out of 3 of them are women, and wonderful women at that. And we seriously don't want to underrepresent that. Having said that, I'm going to go on, and I'm going to do a tribute to a retired UW professor, Jim Olson. Now, I mentioned Jim Olson in my last presentation because I used to have coffee with him at the Acoustic Cafe in Eau Claire, and I would read my poetry to him. And he was famous for saying, "Phil, you do confessional poetry. You're quite good at it, actually." And I hate it. So I was playing the video for my wife, and she said, "Oh, did you know that Jim Olson died?" And I didn't want to believe it. And so I started searching. And in fact, Professor Olson died at 91 in November. And I don't want him to pass so silently. And this will go for some of these other teachers too. Because Jim was the greatest of the greatest generation. He was a New Deal Democrat. He grew up the hard way during the Depression. He fought in the Second World War. And he thought he had this really neat idea when he got out of the Army, because he would join the Minnesota Army Reserves and he could pay for some of his college courses. Now, of course, he ended up getting mobilized in Korea. He won a won a medal for leading a retreat. He was a forward artillery observer, and he said one of the most profound things I've ever heard about Chinese soldiers who had been caught in an artillery crossfire from heavy artillery, knowing the shells were coming in. And he said, and those brave men stood and faced what they had to like you wouldn't believe. Later himself, he was wounded, and he lay in bed in a military hospital next to a captured Chinese officer who was operated upon after him. What I'm trying to get here now is a part of American history where we can feel proud of that. We can feel proud of the Jim Olsons and what they've done as teachers. He also wrote a dissertation, which he always told me was BS, but I wish I could have contacted him, because it turns out now, in terms of the evolution of a post-colonial curriculum, he did some really pioneering work. And if you're listening, Jim, it wasn't BS. It was something important. It was just sort of ahead of its time. All right, I'm going to go to another one of these graphics here, and I'm going to talk about another. She's almost sainted. Her name is Nadine St. Louis, and she died at age 73 in 2010. They had a poetry group in the library. A lot of them faculty wives, local poets, and frankly, I invaded it. I have this ability when I come to a group, without intentionally wanting to do it, I am a man of strong opinions. And much of what I did, they didn't like. And what they liked even less was I didn't seem to care. And so we were edgy all the time. somebody said, well, Philip, you're not putting our corrections into your poems. And I said, well, if I was an oil painter, would I let you scribble on it? But this makes it even better. Because I sent something to Nadine St. Louis once, and it was part of a novella that I was working on called Philip of Traer, whose audience reacted to him sort of like the poetry group reacted to me. And somewhere I've got her comments, and she liked this so much, she was just awestruck from it. Now we're going to continue here, and we're going to talk about an idea of cultural continuity. And we're going to do some time travel. We're going to go back to a time when I was 18 years old, a freshman at UW Stevens Point, college heavyweight wrestler, and a pretty good one. But it turned out that I had an affinity for language and poetry, which, since wrestlers don't usually write poems to each other, nobody really noticed. But her name is was Hazel Koshkalena, and I only saw her once at UW-Madison after I took her course. But we were talking about Shakespeare's play Othello, and it's a magnificent play about a mixed race love story that ends in a brutal tragedy based on lies of an evil character. And Othello was a giant Moor, and a Moor was an African. That's how often black people were referred to in Shakespeare's time. And the question she asked me, and this is a contemporary Othello. You can see the force and the power. You can see it in the man's eyes. I don't even know who he is. But she asked me to describe Othello. And I said, well, Professor Koshkalena, he reminds me much of the world heavyweight champion, boxing champion, Sonny Liston. And she said, Mr. Kaveny, who is Sonny Liston? I said, you gotta be kidding. Who is Sonny Liston? Sonny Liston is a sinister, dark force who's going to be fighting that Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay then, this young black boxer who is probably going to be eaten like a bear. And so she still didn't get Sonny Liston. So this is one of the photographs, but the other one I have of him is from Esquire magazine, and it shows him with his bicycle. But it was a bicycle that he was wearing, not the kind you ride. Now there's a cultural reference, if someone ever studies my work, to what do I mean by bicycle there. Some of you will know. And so what happened is she jump-started my mind. And I want to talk about a historical event at this point. This is August 6th, it took place August 6th, 1945. And when I say the word Hiroshima, you'll all realize that that's what I'm talking about, and it took place 72 years ago. As a matter of fact, I'm one day away from my 30th wedding anniversary because my wife's father was a World War II veteran. He was on the invasion levy for Japan, and had that event not happened, he would probably have been killed in the combat. But out of deference for the experience and the terrible thing that all those Japanese suffered, we moved our wedding day to August 7th. So what I want to say about Hazel Koshkalena, I'm going to hold her picture up now, is, as I said, she's the kind of teacher that talks about the value of an education, and a liberal artistic education where you touch great works of literature. And what you have here is something, if you buy something, if you invest in most things and you use them, they wear out. But the more you use what she gave me, the better it gets.